Welcome, everyone. This is the 7th episode of the Unbanned podcast, and we have one thing to say. Unban Oko, Thief of Crowns, because, wow, that card is doing crazy things right now.
I'm gonna make you into an elk, and me into an elk, and then your grandma into an elk.
And then I'm gonna top 8 a Grand Prix.
My name's Jake, and these are my elks. No, this is Justin.
Hello.
And Jordan.
Hi, I'm Jordan.
And we're here to talk about some Magic. Mythic Championship 5 is going on right now as we speak. It's actually on my other monitor. I'm kind of watching it. Very distracting. So we're going to talk about that. Tomorrow, we're recording this on Sunday the 20th. The 21st, this Monday, there's a banned and restricted announcement that got moved up. So we're going to talk a little bit about that, what might be going on to the ban list, because you don't really move one of these without doing something, right, guys? It's kind of weird.
I mean, you talked about last week that it might just be like a convenience thing where if they need to make adjustments, but I can't believe that they would move it and not think, hey, maybe we'll unban something. I'm sure that they thought it through, right?
Right.
Wizards of the Coast would never do anything without thinking it all the way through.
No.
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, I'm predicting, especially after seeing the Mythic Championship, something's going to change, and I'll get into it a little bit later, but I'm a little worried about what might change and how it might play out because of that. So
that's probably a good enough place to just jump into our Mythic Championship 5 discussion. So guys, have you been watching it all? I kind of got a little busy yesterday when I planned to watch a lot of this, but I've been watching some of it, and surprise, surprise, Field of the Dead is everywhere.
I mean, no one was surprised. It's an insane card in an insane deck. I think the thing that is more surprising is how many people aren't actually running Field of the Dead. Like, right now I've got Stanislav Sivka's Stan's deck pulled up, and he's playing Banned Ramp, but he does not have Field of the Dead in it. It's just like a blue-green food list, but splashing white for Teferi and Deputy Detention.
That's probably a good place where we can actually go over the top 8, because that's what's going on right now.
As we speak.
Like, right now as we speak. So, the top 8 of the Mythic Championship is Bant Ramp by Stanislav Sivka, Bant Golos by
Jean-Emmanuel Duprat.
Thank you, Justin.
That was good, goodness.
I like my French, okay. I just heard it on the stream, so I'm good at repeating what Marshall Sutcliffe says. Thank
you, Marshall. By proxy. We got Gruul Aggro by Javier Dominguez. Still my pick for the tournament. I want him to win. I love Gruul decks. We got Simic Food by William Jensen. Everyone knows him as Huey Jensen. Bant Food by Andrea Mengucci. Simic Food by Gabriel Nassif. A Mono Red Cavalcade list by Li Shi Tian.
And also the Mardu Knights deck by Ken Yukihiro.
I think we should go over the decks that are similar first. We got the Bant and Simic Food lists, which the only real difference between these decks is whether they decide to splash white for Deputy of Detention and sideboard cards, which some of them did, like Andrea Mengucci's list, because he is running 4 Deputy of Detention because it's very good against field. And I think that's why those decks did so well in the top 8, is because they're powerful lists that are positioned well against Field of the Dead. Not like it's an amazing matchup, but they definitely have ways to fight it. And I think that's probably the plan, and it seemed to have worked out well for them.
The whole Bant and Simic Food decks, they just are so... And this plays into our unban and ban for this list, which is Oko. Oko just kind of dominates every single creature matchup. It's just so incredibly powerful, and then on top of that, if you're doing a long matchup, like, I can imagine if we get to a standard maybe after tomorrow where we don't have field, but essentially Oko's just kind of the best thing to be doing at any point. You just gain advantage over pretty much any deck. Anything playing creatures, you turn them into 3/3s, and your stuff is probably bigger. Then on top of that, if you're playing against a long game or a control deck, you have an infinite stream of 3/3s. You can make like a 3/3 every other turn.
And I think it's relevant to mention that Oko kills the aggro matchups, because you can't pressure your opponent's life total when they're gaining 3 life every turn.
I mean, you can. It's possible. It's just,
I mean, it's
really
extremely
hard.
difficult, yeah. But Oko's just, he's an insane card. So good. And I think that's why a lot of people chose to play the food variants of the mid-range decks.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy that we're sitting here talking about how amazing Field of the Dead is, and then the Oko decks can go toe-to-toe with it for the most part.
Let's say that's the problem, is right now Field of the Dead and Oko are kind of fighting neck and neck for the best deck in Standard right now. And we're talking about banning one of them. So if you ban one of them, you kind of just leave the other one to run away from everything.
Yeah, it's an interesting situation to be in. And honestly, I think this would be a good point for a slight mini rant where I say, I think if they do ban Field of the Dead, or if they ban Field of the Dead and Oko, I don't know that we're necessarily going to like where the Standard meta lines up, because I still think that green is the best color, even if you take out those two cards. Because, like, I took a list here. We got cards that I would want to play green to play. We got Innkeeper in the adventure decks. We got Nissa. We got Questing Beast. We got Krasis. Oko, if he doesn't get banned. Wicked Wolf. The Flashy Wolf to go with Wicked Wolf. Leyline of Abundance, which has gone ignored for a while because it just has been outclassed. That's still in the format.
I would argue that the Leyline decks just aren't very good, but
fair enough. And
it's a different topic.
Whether they're good or not is it's still something that could be done, and I've seen do very powerful things. Then there's Cavalier of Thorns, a card that no one's played for a while because it got outclassed, but is still very powerful and very good against both aggro and mid-range decks. There's Voracious Hydra if you want to play Ramp as another payoff. I mean, if Krasis were to get banned, you still have Voracious Hydra, which is a good payoff. Not nearly as good as Krasis, though. Oh, and then there's still Vraska that's good, and Garruk if you want to go green-black. And then there's the support cards. You've got all these mana dorks. You've got Veil of Summer, Once Upon a Time. I just think green is objectively the best color to be playing in Standard right now. I think you want your deck to be base green.
Yeah, I think that's the whole thing there, is that just even before Oko and all these new cards from Throne of Eldraine came out, blue-green was already a decent archetype.
And then it got food as its sub-theme, and now it's just a really, really good deck. And I think if we saw, even if they took, Krasis and Field of the Dead, well, you'd still have Oko. You, almost need to hit all three of them. But then I'm not even sure where the meta ends up. And it's been such a short time with the cards, I'm not sure if we can adapt to them or not. I'd really like to see where it shakes out after the Banned and Restricted and after the Mythic Championship.
That also kind of depends on where we land with the Banned and Restricted announcement tomorrow. Because if we see a Field of the Dead ban, and it's just that one card, creates a power vacuum where Oko can fill that hole. And to be honest, a lot of the decks have kind of adapted to beating Field of the Dead. You can do it with Questing Beast and Embercleave decks. That's what we're seeing in the top 8. Gruul Aggro and Knights are both Embercleave decks that just try to swing through all the zombies with Death Touchers. But we don't really have a whole lot in that style that just beats Simic Food. I'd assume you just want to go bigger than it, but
there's not really a way to, I don't think. The other thing that I think is important to mention about the blue-green base decks is they usually end up banned, and they're usually splashing for 2 cards in particular, is Deputy of Detention and Teferi. And honestly, I would love to see Teferi go. I think Teferi's a bigger deal than a lot of people are actually giving him credit for. I think if you could actually play a lot of counterspells right now, a lot of these decks wouldn't be quite as dominant as they are. It's kind of like they just get a free pass against control and opposing blue decks because you can't Sinister sabotage their Oko because they just drop a Teferi before it if they see any sort of counterspell. It forces you to only play on your own turn, which encourages you to not interact with your opponent and just focus on your game plan and going as big as possible.
I don't know if this is technically on topic here, but just a quick little prediction here. If Field doesn't get banned, I would expect a major non-basic land destruction spell in the next set. Because that's what they usually try and do.
It's possible that happens. I don't know that they... Assuming that doesn't get banned, we have another Mythic Championship in November. It's after the Banned and Restricted announcement. And the weekend after the Banned and Restricted announcement, next Saturday, we have the Mythic Championship qualifier weekend. I think if it doesn't get banned and those are just overrun by Golos, I don't think they're going to wait until January to ban the thing, right?
Okay, I think if they don't ban it tomorrow and we continue to see it dominate the format like this, we would see an emergency ban, honestly.
When would they ever do that in standard, Jordan?
It's never been done before. No precedent whatsoever. Let's just ignore all of that.
Let's ignore that weird cat thing that was there a couple years ago.
Yeah.
Is Saheeli the first actual emergency ban in standard?
No, Memory Jar from Urza's Saga, I believe was. It got banned before it even released.
They were like, we messed up.
Oops.
Have we talked out Simic Food yet? And can we move on to the other more interesting parts of the top 8?
Well, let's give Golos a little bit of love really quick. I know that we're talking about banning it. So, the Golos decks are actually getting kind of interesting. I've been playing a lot of Field of the Dead decks online, and the ways people are trying to, like, fix the mirror match and beat stuff is just interesting.
Yeah, I really like Kenrith, the Return King. That's some cool technology. Or
I have the opposite feeling. I hate Kenrith.
No, it's the worst thing to happen.
I think it's one of the most, like, the minute that players understood that this card can just make a giant board of things, overrun through everything at not instant speed, but very easily, because it gives it self-haste too, and you don't have to tap it to do its one red ability. Like, it's crazy, and
it's a Swiss Army knife. It does a little bit of everything for you. Whatever the situation calls for, Kenrith has got your back.
I'm just wondering, like, if Field goes, does Kenrith have a place where we can play it still? Because it still just seems busted.
The ramp decks are still good. You can just play a Bant ramp deck and put that in it as one of your payoffs, and it works. Like, and it's not like they would ban the gates and circuitous route, so you could still splash the other colors using the gates.
The only question is, like, what are we making our board off of?
How do you mean?
Because the ability to just swing with all these trampling hasty boys, it comes from Field of the Dead. So, like, are we?
There are a few tokens decks that have been seeing play in response to Field of the Dead and Oko, and there's a lot of token generation that you could use. I'm not sure if that's an avenue people would want to use, but it could work for sure. The other piece of tech that I see the Bant decks going with the Golos decks is Agent of Treachery, and a lot of people were reanimating that, and then once you realized, oh wait, you hit 7 mana very easily with this deck, Agent of Treachery is a heck of a card, especially when combined with Teferi. It's just, that is nuts. Being able to just keep taking your opponent's lands every turn, or keep taking their best creature, or their best planeswalker, card is gross.
Yeah. Alright, yeah, that's our little, that's our blurb on Golos, and yeah, it's a great deck. If it survives the ban list, you should probably play it, because
yeah, we could keep talking about it, but this isn't a deep dive. We got other things to move on to, like the more interesting parts.
The fun deck.
Breakout decks. Well, I guess this is a good time to go and talk about what I consider to be the breakout decks of the tournament, such as Mono Red Cavalcade. So, I didn't expect to see any sort of aggressive deck at this tournament. Just because I kind of thought there'd be enough food running around that it would get punished, because these decks really don't win against Oko. Like, Li Shiqian is playing Mono Red Cavalcade straight up, just the deck that you would expect people to be playing when they play Cavalcade. And he made top 8 with it in a sea of food, and he says the reason he was able to do that is he dodged the Oko decks. And I don't know, the deck just seems very powerful if you do manage to dodge those Oko decks. Like, it's very good against Banfield.
Also, Torbrand helps a lot.
yeah.
Torbrand is amazing. Such a good card. I was excited for it in our top 10s, and it's still been very, very powerful.
I don't want to sidetrack us down the Oko street again, but the fact that this red deck is not playing a single copy of Fry should tell you exactly how Oko was messed up in the design process.
Yeah, the fact that the card that you would use to counter Oko is not in this deck because it's useless against Oko. Or it could actually, maybe Li Shiqian doesn't think that it's useless. He is just hoping to dodge that matchup entirely because it's so bad, so wanted to commit the other cards in the sideboard to beating matchups that they had a better chance of beating.
So yeah, I've been playing this deck. I've been playing an exact copy that Li Shitian is playing. It's kind of weird seeing some certain cards left out. Like, I like the 3 Tybalt in there, but I don't understand why it's not playing the rare Chandra, the one that makes 2 elementals as a 0 in the 3-drop slot. I don't know, maybe he knows the deck better than me.
I think it's for curve consideration, because you're playing the Bone Crusher Giant as your 3-drop, and then above that you've got Torbrand. And when you're running 4 4-drops in a mono red deck like this, you really don't want that many 3-drops, because they're only running 21 land.
What Justin is, I think, saying is, why is he playing Tybalt main board over Chandra?
But I would assume that the Tybalt is there instead of Chandra to help with the food matchup, and also to stop Hydroid Crisis from just ending the game for him.
This is something that a lot of people watching this tournament will probably misconstrue. This is a relatively small field tournament, and a lot of the people in it are very well known already. I think Li Shitian probably plays the Tybalt here, not just because it's good in the deck and it makes 1/1s that trigger the Cavalcade, but also because he probably knew that a lot of life gain was going to be packed specifically for his deck. He's basically one of the only aggro decks, and he wants to make sure that, like, Hydroid Crisis is not doing its thing of gaining life. Whereas Chandra doesn't actually do that. It just lets you get more reach.
I mean, Chandra is definitely a card that could have been played, and it's interesting to think about why he didn't, for sure. I think it's also interesting that there's no there's no Experimental Frenzy in the main deck here. Just all in on the Torbrand plan. That's really hard to say.
I don't think that's surprising to me, honestly. You just want your main deck to be as consistent as possible. And Experimental Frenzy is good, and it gives you a lot of advantage. You're basically just drawing like 2 or 3 cards a turn, but it doesn't actually... The consistency of the card is kind of not great. Like, a lot of time you'll just hit like 2 lands in a row, and then your 4-drop actually didn't do anything.
Yeah. Another thing that is the 3 Castle Embereth. I think people were kind of sleeping on Castle Embereth. I've been playing it in a couple of decks that make a kind of a wide board, and gosh, the card is gas. You don't expect a +1 to everything's power to just turn like a couple of 3/3s into lethal, but it does. Like, especially here where he's got so many little bodies that he's able to spread out across the field. Like, that Castle Embereth is huge.
The whole castle cycle is just... Ooh, it's been such gas. I'm kind of sad I didn't throw these guys on my top 10 anywhere. I guess I just didn't read them properly.
Could have seen the future.
Well, someone at our local game store was like giving me crap for my number 1 pick, and I'm like, it's really easy to say you're wrong once you actually played with the cards. But still, this is something I'm going to have to look at, because essentially a lot of these cards are just free, and I didn't ever read them like that.
Yeah, it seems like if you're playing a land that's not a dual land, it would hit your mana too hard, right? And especially, at least in decks that, aren't monocolored. But it's almost like you're just playing another basic. It's so crazy that that's how these end up playing out, that they're just a basic that has an ability strapped onto them. It's weird.
It helps that the Shocklands also turn them on.
Yeah, I think without the Shocklands, we'd be living in a different world, but with the Shocklands in Standard at the same time, that's kind of huge. Oh, before I forget, I kind of want to make a prediction. I think the castles are a good indication that we will be getting the Tango lands with Zendikar coming up, because they check for type, and the Tango lands have the types on them.
Like the other half of the lands, the battle lands?
So I'll ask later, because that's not really on topic. But anyway, yeah, anything else to say about the Cavalcade deck?
Nope, not really. Kind of just, it's a, mono red still in Standard.
Oh, are you ready for this week's Jake rant, guys?
Uh-oh.
Go ahead.
All right. So this list is only $17 on MTGO, $74 on paper. Absolutely amazing budget list. If you need a deck to get into Standard, this is your guy.
Oh, yeah.
On Arena, this deck has 4 Fervent Champions, 4 Runaway Steamkins, 4 Bone Crusher Knights, 4 Torbrands, and Castle Embrith, and Experimental Frenzy, and Legion War Boss. This deck takes
26.
This deck takes 26 rare cards, rare wild cards in Arena. This is one of the most expensive, like, wild card decks I think I've ever seen.
Because rares are so rare. It's worse to get rares than it is to get mythics a lot of the time.
The other decks in the format are like Mardu Knights has 7 mythic, 36 rares, so you're playing a lot of rares. But this is not a budget deck online at all.
Well, if you think about it, if you built the previous version of this deck, of the mono red deck in Standard, you probably already have 3 Experimental Frenzies and War Bosses and Steamkins.
But my point is, if I'm brand new getting into this game, everyone is going to tell me to build mono red because it's the cheapest deck to build. And everyone is going to be basically wrong because for some reason, every good card in this format, no matter what it is a rare. Acclaimed Contender is basically a worse version of Militia Bugler. But
for Knights.
But for Knights, it's a 3-cost thing that if you have a Knight, you look at the top 5 cards of your library, and you can get a Knight, aura, or equipment, or a legendary artifact, and you put them in your hand. So it's basically Militia Bugler with an extra power, because it's a 3/3 instead of a 2/3. It's a rare. I have absolutely no idea why this card is a rare. It's literally a worse version of Militia Bugler, which was an uncommon in the last format, but this one's a rare. And the only reason I could think that they would make this card a rare, because it does not break draft, is that Arena makes you have to have rare wild cards so they can sell more packs.
I completely agree with what you're saying, because Arena seems like it would be cheaper to get into because it's free to play, but like a lot of free to play games, it ends up being more expensive in the long run if you want to get all the things and actually play competitively. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I think maybe Militia Buglers should have been a rare, and Acclaimed Contender just is a rare, because that effect is a lot more powerful than what you would expect on an uncommon. Well, but at the same time, it is a little bit underwhelming, especially if you get this card in your pack. It's like, oh, okay, if I'm not playing Knights, this card is useless.
It's just kind of crazy to me, because I feel like it wasn't like this a year and a half ago. I feel like before Ravnica, you could make a deck that wasn't just rares and mythics, and now we just don't have that. Every deck is like $500, $600.
I don't know if it's necessarily true that you could make a deck that doesn't use rares and mythics. I think it's more that the price of Magic continues to go up. It's not necessarily that they've changed the way the packs work. It's just all of the cards are more expensive.
That's what I'm saying, though, is I don't think that the packs are the same. I think they are actively putting rares and mythics differently, and like, maybe Acclaimed Contender should be a rare with the text on the card, but if you altered a little bit, I think this could have been an uncommon.
So, just to quickly counter that point, you can always go online and find a cheaper deck. Like, obviously, this is the best deck to play in mono red, but there's going to be better decks.
Yeah, there's a budget version of the Cavalcade.
Yeah, I'm looking at one right now that uses 1 rare wild card, and that's for Chandra.
Yeah, and it's like, I can tell you what the deck looks like even. It just like runs Ginger Brood and like more 1-drops and a few more 2-drops instead that are different that would work with Cavalcade. And you can run that instead. It's just not competitive.
Yeah, I wouldn't call it competitive, but you could definitely slowly work on it.
It's just kind of crazy to me as well, because most of the time post-rotation we kind of like have to dig for like, oh, well, this uncommon is now powerful enough to actually be played because there's less rares and less mythics in the format. That's not happening here. Everything is just so powerful.
Yeah, the power creep's a little too high for my liking at the moment.
I mean, I like powerful sets. I think it's that certain things in these sets got more love than others. Although you were just talking about the Mardu Knights list, so how about we go through the Mardu Knights list, which is the other kind of spicy thing from this tournament.
It's actually the only, sorry to interrupt here, but it's actually the only matchup was Li Shitian with the Cavalcade deck and Ken Yukihiro with the Mardu Knights deck. It's actually the only match so far, and right now we're on the semifinals of the lower bracket. It's the only match to go 2-0. Every other match so far has gone 2-1.
The Murder Knights list and the Gruul list, I kind of almost lumped them together because they're both examples of put Embercleave on something giant or flying or with Death Touch and kill our opponent.
Yeah, I think that's the card of this tournament that should be getting more attention, but won't because the BNR is coming up, is Embercleave. Is so much better than I ever thought it would be. Like, I was considering putting it in a couple of decks before this tournament, and now after seeing people use it a little bit more, goodness, the card is straight gas. I want to put it in my blue-red deck. Like, it seems so good.
It's interesting because it's oftentimes just like a better Temur Battle Rage. And if you had said to me, hey, Embercleave is Temur Battle Rage, but it gives something +1/+1, I would have been ecstatic. I would have been like, oh, hey, how do I fit this into Grixis Death Shadow in Modern? Because that sounds amazing.
I think it might also be a symptom of the format right now that you kind of just need to push in just a little more damage. Just push through just a little bit more when you're an aggro deck right now, because usually you can pretty much guarantee your opponent's going to go wide and be able to have blockers. So that double strike trample is just, it's so good. Even if it's just on like a 3/3, it's still going to kill your opponent probably.
The other thing you need to think about, especially in the Mardu Knights deck, is you've got Embercleave, you got Rotting Register. So you play Rotting Register, you give it +2/+0 with Rimrock Knight, you attack. Your Embercleave is free now, so you're dealing 22 double strike damage. Embercleave is +1/+1, and Rimrock Knight is +2/+0. So that's 9. Yeah, was that 20?
Or in the Gruul deck being played by Javier Dominguez, you collision and then you Embercleave, and it's just like, you can easily push through 15 damage with that. It's insane.
Yeah, Collision Colossus seems really good right now with all the zombies running around. The interaction most of these decks are kind of living off of, too, is Questing Beast or Knight of the Ebon Legion having Death Touch, which means that you can assign 1 damage to each zombie and trample through for the rest of the damage to like actually kill the Golos players.
That's some clever use of combat tricks there. What is Red Cap Melee? Is there anything with the Gruul deck that we need to talk about?
Red Cap Melee it deals 4 damage to something, and then if that target is not red, you have to sacrifice a land. So it's just a really efficient removal spell. It's good for Planeswalkers too. It does creature or Planeswalker, not anything, sorry.
Yeah.
It's just efficient. You kill other red things with it. If you have extra land in the late game, it's just a good spell. I'm surprised I haven't seen more of it, honestly.
Do want to point out a funny thing, not with the Gruul deck, but with the Mardu Knights deck. I am in love with the 3 of Chance of Glory in sideboard.
Yeah, we've seen a little bit of that card from the Golos decks as a way to you swing with all your zombies, the opponent blocks with their zombies, and then you get a second attack. But in this deck, it gives you another hit with Rotting Regisaur. You can just make your board big and swing for a lot, of course, but it just seems good.
Yeah, if you throw an Embercleave on a Regisaur and you swing in and then you play this card.
And then give it indestructible.
Yeah, it's an indestructible 8/7 with double strike trample that's swinging in for the 2nd time in a row.
Yeah, that's a lot of damage.
It seems like if you're not going to play Golos right now, you just want to go under it, is basically the way to deal with it. If you're not going to play Golos or blue-green, I should say.
You don't want to go under it. You want to Embercleave it.
You want to
undercleave it? Ember?
You want to go undercleave. Okay, let's get.
Listen, yeah, we're not comedians. We're done. All right.
We're bad at this.
Emberneath.
Emberneath it. Emberneath it.
Yeah, Emberneath. Yeah, there you go. You're gonna go underneath Emberneath it.
Anyway, play Embercleave if you're not playing Golos, because apparently it's great. And it just looks like a lot of fun. It's one of those beatdown decks that has more intricacy than it looks like initially.
Especially the Mardu Knights list. Like, that deck is... It looks like it can grind, honestly.
You got tricks, man, all over the place.
Yeah. Yeah, is that kind of it for our discussion on Mythic Championship? I think we've said about all we can say. Oh, wait, we should reference the fact that underneath the top 8, what is lurking?
you might be looking at this top 8 as well, and we would talk about who won, what the actual ranking was. But by the time this goes out, we'll have actually recorded before that, but you guys will all know. So congratulations to whoever wins. Congratulations to top 8. But beneath the top 8, there's something lurking, and we wanted to point it out. Because this looks fairly diverse. We've got a Gruul aggro deck, we've got a few food decks, we've got like 2 Golos decks, this Mono Red deck, the Mardu Knights deck. Seems like a pretty good top 8, but if you look at the top 16 of this tournament, pretty much all of the top 16, aside from the things that the diversity that hit top 8, are feel of the deck. Like, it's insane, and we'll have the standings by the time this episode goes out, so go check them, look at the top 16, look at the top 32, because this was a really small field tournament. It was only 68 players, I think?
Yes.
And so much of them, so many of these players with just huge pedigrees, I think it was 60% of them picked a Field of the Dead deck. And when you have that much of a majority of the tournament, you're gonna get this cannibalization effect where they knock each other out. We saw this with Hogak in the last Mythic Championship, where it was this huge, giant, horrible deck that was just way too powerful, but we only saw 2 copies in the top 8 because a lot of them knocked each other out.
Well, it's a math problem. If you got 60% of the field that's playing one deck, after the first round, only 30% are undefeated because they played against each other, and someone has to lose.
There were also, and we won't spend a lot of time on this, but there were a lot of technical issues with Arena at this tournament. You can go check out Twitter. There was, I think even Brad Nelson was sending tweets about it, how like one of his matches had to be restarted, and he was very heavily ahead.
Oh my god.
This is kind of the issue of switching to an esport, is that you get all of the issues that come with dealing with a computer instead of just paper Magic. And to be fair, paper Magic has issues. Things can get knocked over. You can have people cheating, but you have someone sitting there watching it and you're filming the whole thing, so those don't really pop up as much as, oh, the game just decided to break. Oh no.
Do we want to bring up not the last GP Vegas, but the one before that? Where everybody waited for, 2-3 hours waiting for round 4 or something like that to start?
Yeah, I ended up waiting through that and then dropping the next round just because I was like, well, I'm dead now, and I waited for 4 hours to see if I could maybe make day 2. It wasn't really 4 hours. I think it was like an hour and a half, 2 hours before they got it back up, but it felt like 4, goodness.
Yeah, so it's possible that even paper can have these mistakes happen.
It's true, but the fact that they are putting this much on the line, there's this high of stakes, and the program isn't actually stable for them, that's a big deal. And they need to address that before the next Mythic Championship. If that happens again...
Yeah, that's bad. That's really bad. Also, I struggle as to why in the world they can't rewind a game. Why would they not be able to... Because the game puts out log files of how the game played out. And I don't know if it only keeps track of who won and who lost and what was played. But, I mean, there are programs that can give you a deck list, and it keeps track of it like up to date with what's in your deck. So they can't track what was played throughout the game and then wind it back? Because I'm pretty sure there's other games that can do that in case of a technical problem. So I don't know, seems like an oversight on their part.
Yeah, it's concerning. Hopefully we'll have it fixed by next time. And they pulled a lot of people off of apparently other projects in the team because they wanted to get the actual program running correctly. I know I've been streaming it a lot recently, and if your whole processor is not focused entirely on Arena, it just starts lagging. And there's absolutely no reason that my computer should not be able to stream while playing Arena. It's not that high fidelity of a program. It just is not.
Yeah, and I don't want to bring up other games on the podcast too often because this is a Magic the Gathering podcast. That's our focus.
Damn straight.
But they have some serious competition coming up. Riot Games just announced Legends of Runeterra, and it is blowing up on Twitch. The game looks sweet. It's super stable. It's beautiful. Like, Arena, you gotta step up your game because they're coming for you.
Other games aside, it's kind of crazy, some of the things going on with Arena right now. And this has probably gone on long enough, but I remember I made a joke on Twitter and I'm going to bring it up, where they said, they were saying something about coming out of beta, and someone said it's still a beta, like a day later. And I just said, most betas have friendless.
Yeah, no, if you have a feature that is planned and it's not in the beta, your beta's not a beta, it's an alpha. Most betas are feature complete.
Yeah, that's bad.
Yeah, well, and it's interesting because Wizards is owned by Hasbro, and Hasbro is a very large company, so Wizards ends up becoming a very large company, right? But it seems as though they've got the MTGA team as like this small dev team. It's like they're an indie team. They just don't want to give them resources. I don't know how the structure works, but that just kind of seems like it because they're kind of slow to implement things, you know?
I don't think they don't want to give it the money. I think that, so if you're creating a brand new piece of software that you're not sure will actually hit and become as popular as you want it to be, which is definitely what Arena was. It was a complete and total shock to them that it became as popular as it became.
Wasn't a shock to us.
It was a shock to me. I didn't expect it to blow up like it did. It blew up to the point where, like, most standard decks near the initial launch of open beta were worth like 25 cents a piece because no one was playing standard on MTGO right then. It was crazy.
Yeah, I gotcha.
They never expected it to become this big, so they've been trying to, like, adapt to how big it is. And the problem is that takes time. You can't just go out and hire 100 programmers and engineers and, like, esports staff off the bat, because you're gonna get really crappy people if you just pick 100 people and hire them all.
Yeah, it takes time to build it for sure. But I mean, they've had almost a year. They should be getting to the point where they can now, right?
Yeah, I think they're getting better. I think what probably happened, though, is that they had this small team. They made this program. They're like, okay, we're going to do a long beta. We're going to get it into a good place, and then hopefully it'll be big. And then it became big before they were ready, and they're kind of scrambling to put it all together. So hopefully it'll get fixed and be really, really amazing, and the esports will be just as good. So we don't want to spend too much time on it because we also talked about it a lot while we were discussing the decks and all that. But there is a banned and restricted announcement tomorrow where I think we're pretty much all on board with Feel the Dead getting the axe here at the podcast. Do you guys agree?
I think my prediction would be Field gets banned, and also I'm alright with it. I mean, I love playing the deck, but it's gross. It's not okay. It's too much.
I'm not looking forward to my standard streams if it's still in the format, because I've been playing pretty much straight Golos on my stream, and I'd like to play something else. It'd be nice. I'll be honest.
Justin, as the resident jank player, are you happy to see it go?
You know, it's nice to see it go, but I don't play ranked as much, so I don't usually see these. I don't see these standard decks usually. I usually have to face like other jank decks.
Yeah, I wanted to talk really quick about if you could pick another card to, like, get rid of in standard, what would it be? And my pick is probably, it's a weird pick. Brad Nelson was talking about it on Twitter, and he said it and it kind of just spoke to me. Because if you think about it, a lot of the blue-green decks do this thing where they're, like, pretty good early game, and then they hit Nissa, and it's just, like, they have an unstoppable late game. I don't know if it's the right ban, but I wouldn't be surprised to see it go.
I saw someone saying that the best way to counter Field of the Dead was to play a turn 3 Nissa.
That is pretty good. It's a fast clock.
And it's something that they can't really keep up with either.
And here's the thing. I don't think Nissa would be that bad, except they gave us another turn 1 ramp spell. I don't really know why they did that.
Yeah, that you're not really wrong.
The Goose is, like, enabling so much that Llanowar Elves was doing before, and it's like, this is basically just Llanowar Elves again.
The Golden Goose is carrying this format on its back right now.
So I said Oko as a joke while he was bringing that up, but honestly, I'm getting sick of Krasis. I'm so over it at this point.
I think that Krasis is not, like, if we removed some of the ramp and, like, some of the consistency from these decks by removing, like, Oko or Nissa, I don't think Krasis would be nearly as bad as it is. This is kind of emblematic of what we were talking about earlier where we mentioned power creep. I have no idea why Krasis is a cast trigger.
Yeah, like
No,
why?
it's
You print Disdainful Stroke to deal with this card, and then you make it so the card goes around it.
Like the cast thing, it's sacred. It's only for those Eldrazi. You can't just give it to this random jellyfish.
Oh man, you can't talk about Eldrazi while I'm over here talking about bans. I'll go off.
Yeah, I don't understand the cast. If it was ETB, I'd be pretty okay with it. But it's just like if you're playing like Mono Red Cavalcade, for example, there's nothing you can do. Like, granted, you don't counter it in the first place, but
it definitely is a punishing card for your opponent to top deck if you're playing any sort of an aggressive deck.
yeah. It's like, hey, I've got this game settled right here. And you're like, oops, I tapped 10 mana and now I've drawn 4 cards and also I can now just kill you. My turn.
Yeah.
It's annoying.
Is that the only one you would ban?
I don't like Oko.
So we got 2. Oko and Krasis.
I would be shocked if Oko got the axe, but
I think it's too early, yeah. They'll wait to see what Oko does long term, like in a couple of months.
yeah, I don't think it's completely broken. I think it's kind of like Teferi has been, where it's like, this is not completely broken, but it's going to warp the format around it.
So actually, you mentioning Teferi is a good way for me to go into my list. My list, like my decks, is on average more aggressive than yours. I want Field gone, I want Teferi gone, I want Krasis gone, and I want Nissa gone. I want 4 cards banned. And here's why. I stand by what I said before. Teferi is not a card that is good in Standard. I don't think it's a card that should have existed ever. Giving all of your cards cannot be countered is not something I want to be in the game on turn 3. And having a card that says, not only can you not counter my cards, you also can't touch my things on my turn at all, is a card I doubly don't want in any format ever. Because it just makes you play on your own turn. There's no reason to play instant speed interaction in a format where Teferi is prevalent. It's not worth it. And I hate that. As someone who likes to play tempo decks, who likes control, who likes to interact with what my opponent is doing, I hate a card that makes me only play on my turn. So that's just my kind of personal pick, and I also kind of think that he's a key piece. Like, I'm seeing these blue-green food decks that are splashing white to play Teferi and like one other card. That is so telling to me that he's the reason they want white. They don't want anything else in white, just him. And I think it's ridiculous.
I kind of am on board with banning Teferi. About the point I saw people playing Teferi in Modern and they were using it to protect their Saheeli Rai copycat combo, I was like, it basically dawned on me, Teferi's a little bit like Force of Will. It's like you like read the card and you say, oh, this is supposed to stop degenerate things. People can't play at instant speed, I can bounce stuff, I can play my stuff without getting countered, but then you realize, if you give people the ability to not be countered, they're going to use that to protect degenerate combos. I've seen a lot of Teferi in, like, I wanted to play it in Storm so that people couldn't interact with me on my turn. It's the same thing as, like, Grand Abolisher, but it's on a Planeswalker that also interacts with your opponent's board.
Yeah. It seems like it would be such a fair card, but what it really does is protect degenerate decks. Like, if you resolve a Teferi on turn 3 in Bantfield, your turn 4 Circuitous route is safe. They have to deal with the Teferi before your Circuitous route. It's like you get a free counterspell. It really is. It's like a Force of Will, like you said. The only thing is, you didn't have to commit 2 cards to it. You didn't have to play around your opponent's counterspell. You just lay it down and it does its thing.
It's not literally Force of Will. It's kind of like an abstract Force of Will that, like, it just helps you protect your things without much cost.
Exactly. And the other thing is, since it cantrips, it really isn't a cost. It pays for itself, even if you don't need it to really protect your stuff.
So, this leads to a question for me. Is Teferi the reason Splinterton will not be unbanned in Modern?
I mean, Teferi has basically enabled you to play Splinter Twin again.
Although now you don't play it by playing a tempo game. you just play a like control mid-range game built around Teferi, making it so your opponent can't interact.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like, is Splinter Twin not getting unbanned now because of...
Possibly. I don't know. That could be a thing.
I don't think Splinter Twin was going to get unbanned anyway, because, well, we'll talk about Splinter Twin another day when we have more time, but I don't think it's getting unbanned anyway. I just think that it is enabling a lot of things that are like Splinter Twin and the reasons they banned that card in Modern, and for some reason they think this one is okay. Like, it's the thing that they said where it's like, you always play this card if you're in these colors. If you're playing a blue-white and you don't have that Teferi card, I don't know what you're doing in Modern.
Yeah, it's like, why would you not play Teferi in your blue-white list? If you're playing, it doesn't matter whether you're playing, like,
tempo, control, a combo deck.
It doesn't matter. Just run him. He's good in everything. If you're in blue-white, put him in your deck. It's good. Even if you just run him as a 2-of, so for sometimes he stops your opponent from countering your stuff. Like, it's worth it.
Now you're making me want to play this in my Living End deck.
Yo, Living End with him? That's sweet. Dude, try it.
It turns your non-instant speed Living End enabler into an instant speed one.
That's the other thing. His uptick is obscene.
It's pretty gross.
Letting me Thoughtseize on my opponent's draw step? No. Let's not have that happen, ever. Stop.
Alright, though. What's the rest of your list?
Okay, so Field of the Dead we've talked about. That one we don't need to go into anymore. Maybe if Strip Mine were in the format, it wouldn't be a problem, but... Or if they had just reprinted Field of Ruin. But the other two are Nissa and Krasis. So, my explanation for this is basically you can do one of two things. You can ban all the ramp, or you can ban those two cards. Because you either ban the 12 cards that enable ramp decks, and thus they are no longer ramp decks, they have to play a mid-range game, or you ban their payoffs. And this is just simply banning the two cards that they use as their best payoffs. Because otherwise, what are they ramping into? They can ramp into a Voracious Hydra, but that doesn't pay for itself in the same way. You could ramp into like a Cavalier of Thorns, but again, that's just a 5/6 creature. It's really good, but it doesn't take over the game in the same way. So I think the best way to deal with it would be to just take their payoffs. They can't get Nissa, they can't make a board full of indestructible 3/3s eventually, and they can't play Krasis to stabilize against aggro, and then aggro could actually prey on them again. Because one of the main problems that I run into when playing aggro and also benefit from when I'm playing against aggro with a blue-green deck is a top deck Krasis just wins you the game. If you get your 8 lands down and you play a 6/6 Krasis, they can't swing in against it, and you've just gained the 3 life and stabilized.
So something else I wanted to touch on really quick is the ban restricted announcement. It was moved up, and a lot of people are looking at standard and being very aggressive with their talk of, we need to ban Field of the Dead, we need to ban this, that. And that's fine. That's pretty normal for Magic players. I think we're missing something else, though. Modern, Legacy, and Pauper are all in states that are kind of not acceptable. Legacy is getting straight up destroyed by Red and 6, and Emery is doing interesting things in Modern. I don't think anything gets banned tomorrow, but it's possible.
I'd like to... I mean, we could talk about what the future might look like, because I think Emery is... We kind of said it when we were doing previews. Emery's going to be a problem. I don't know when, but she will be. And it might lead to either her being banned, Mox Opal, maybe Urza. Something's going to get banned from those decks, because she's just too good of an enabler for them. Like, eventually we're going to have a KCI situation on our hands.
Well, here's the thing that's interesting is we kind of expected Urza decks to get Emery and like do crazy things, and they are. They are basically playing a version of a vintage deck with Paradoxical Outcome. They're playing Urza still. They're playing like more combo-y versions with Jeskai Ascendancy. But the interesting thing about the format is currently it's responding by playing Amulet Titan saw a huge resurgence in the last SCG tournament, and it's because it got Once Upon a Time, and it can now search for its lands and creatures it wants so desperately. So it's kind of like it got another Summoner's Pact.
Once Upon a Time's another one that is huge.
It's like a mix of Summoner's Pact and Ancient Stirgs, so it just loves it. Like, you cut a bunch of cards and you're just playing it. Tron got another uptick, and Eldrazi is still there. Titan Shift is basically too slow at this point, but basically everyone's trying to play faster combo decks to beat Urza and the aggressive decks in Tron.
Yeah, at a competitive level, Modern seems like it's going back towards degeneracy.
We were so good for like a month.
I feel like that's how it ends up. They do this thing where they fix it, and then they print a couple of cards, and then it breaks it again. And I think it's just the problem with Modern. It's always going to be like this until you print some answers into it that can keep everything else in check. And also, like, you need to get rid of, I think the ban list needs to have something like Mox Opal on it. You need to take out some of the things fueling the more degenerate decks, because you could print Force of Will right now. It wouldn't fix the format. It would not do anything to this.
It might make it worse, actually.
Yeah. You could print Null Rod in this format. It still wouldn't change anything. Like, all the cards that people say, like, normally keep stuff like this in check, it wouldn't keep this in check. Not in Modern. As far as Pauper, I think it's pretty obvious they just need to get rid of Astrolab. That card should have been an uncommon, not a common.
Yeah, I agree.
And also potentially the blue common land from Throne of Eldraine.
Oh.
Still looks scary.
Yeah, I don't know. I haven't seen anyone playing that in Pauper. I'd love to go experiment with it. I don't think it's unfair, because Pauper is a very grindy format usually, so I think it just slots in. And maybe replaces some of the other cards that a lot of blue decks play, but I don't think it's too good for the format. We'll have to see. It seems very powerful, though.
We're not. I think we're running a little bit high on time right now, so we're not gonna delve any deeper into this. But we are definitely gonna have to do like a Pauper and a Modern episode or two coming up here. It's gonna be a little bit of a long stretch to the next set, so Standard's gonna get stale with or without Field of the Dead. Probably look towards December. We'll do some actual Modern Pauper content.
Mm-hmm.
I need to go get back into the format. I need to go buy a couple decks on MTGO for Pauper.
Do you need a training montage?
Oh yeah, we'll get all the best decks in Pauper and just do a training montage.
Oh, you haven't seen the commercial that they've played way too many times on the stream, obviously. Sorry.
Oh no, I've seen it.
Yeah, that's a whole thing.
It's a good commercial. Like they're killing it with their marketing game.
It's a good commercial. It's not good the 7th time you've seen it. At some point, I think in like 6 months, they're going to have enough media material that there's going to be variety in these casts where you don't see the same thing every 10 minutes, but they have to produce it.
Anyway, let's move on.
All right, I think we're pretty much done for today. Everyone,
we're tapped out.
Yeah, tapped out.
Ooh, that's a good one.
I did want to stop for a little bit of positivity. We're a little negative on some of these casts, so let's give a second. You guys have been awesome. We are almost triple our downloads for last month. We're about to hit 100 for this month.
It's insane.
It's crazy.
Thank you so much.
That's a blast your air horns.
Blah, blah, blah. Thank you everyone for listening every week, and give us feedback. Honestly, like reach out to us on Twitter at the Unbanned Cast, any of our personal Twitters. We'd love to hear from you guys, and
also, if you're watching on YouTube, you can comment.
Yeah, if you're watching on YouTube, you can comment. We'd love to hear from you guys, and it's just great making content every week. We're excited to do it.
Y'all are awesome.
So, I've been Jake the Jackal. Jake, you can find me everywhere under that name, Jake the Jackal, Twitch, Twitter. I've been streaming a lot recently, so come check me out. Jordan is It Fox on Twitch, Twitter, YouTube. Check him out. He does great stuff. He's doing dailies on YouTube now, so if you want like a little bite-sized piece of Magic the Gathering Arena content every day, go follow him.
Except for that one day that was 40 minutes for some reason. That was nuts.
Sometimes not so bite-sized. And Justin, he's Dubious Justin on Twitter. He's Dubious Challenger on Twitch and YouTube. Go follow him. You need to tweet more, man. You gotta hit that Twitter game.
It's not my thing. I'll try, but I'm not the best at the tweeter.
Yeah, I'll teach you. Don't worry. We'll have a training montage, Sophia.
Ooh, 2 training montages in 1 week.
I know.
Ba-da-da-da. Da-da-da-da-da.
Everyone, thanks once again for listening, and we'll see you next week. But we have to say, you should probably ban Oko. He's pretty good.
I did say that. I did say to do that.
Yeah, you did.